What is Art? By Leo Tolstoy. Chapter 14. I know how it is with most people, not only those who pass for clever, but people who really are very clever, able to follow the hardest arguments in science, mathematics, and philosophy, can very rarely take in even the simplest and most obvious truth, if that truth forces them to admit something. It forces them to admit that a judgment they formed, sometimes with great effort, a judgment they are proud of, a judgment they have taught to others, a judgment on which they have built their whole lives, may be false. And so I have little hope that the arguments I bring forward about the perversion of art and taste in our society will be accepted, or even seriously discussed. Yet I must say to the end what my inquiry into the question of art has inevitably brought me to. It has brought me to this conviction: almost everything that our society counts as art, and as good art, and as the whole of art, is not real art, and is not good art, and is not the whole of art. It is not art at all. It is a counterfeit of art. This is a strange position, I know, and it looks like a paradox. But if we once grant that art is a human activity by which one person carries his feelings over to others, and not a service of beauty, or a manifestation of the idea, or anything of the kind, then we are bound to grant this too. If it is true that art is an activity by which a man who has experienced a feeling deliberately carries it over to others, then we have to admit something further. Of everything that we call the art of the upper classes, of all those novels, tales, dramas, comedies, pictures, sculptures, symphonies, operas, operettas, and ballets that pass for works of art, hardly 1 in 100,000 has come out of a feeling the author actually had. All the rest are factory goods, counterfeits of art, in which borrowing, imitation, striking effect, and the power to keep you interested take the place of infection with feeling. That the number of true works of art stands to the number of these counterfeits as 1 to hundreds of thousands, and a good deal more than that, can be shown by a simple calculation. I have read somewhere that in Paris alone there are 30,000 painters. There must be as many in England, as many in Germany, and as many in Russia, together with Italy and the smaller states. So there must be something like 120,000 painters in Europe, and as many musicians, and as many writers. If these 300,000 people each produce even 3 works a year, and many produce 10 or more, then every year yields 1,000,000 works of art. How many then in the last 10 years, and how many in all the time since the art of the upper classes broke away from the art of the people? Now, which of the greatest experts in art has really taken in an impression from all these supposed works of art, or even knows that they exist? Leave aside the whole working people, who have no notion of these things at all. People of the upper classes cannot know 1,000th of these works, and they do not remember the ones they did know. All these objects come forward under the name of art, make no impression on anyone except perhaps the impression of amusement on an idle crowd of rich people, and vanish without a trace. The usual answer is that without this vast number of failed attempts, there would be no real works of art either. But that is the argument a baker would make if you told him his bread was uneatable, that without 100 spoiled loaves there would be no well-baked one. It is true that where there is gold there is also a great deal of sand, but that can never be a reason for talking a great deal of nonsense in order to say one wise thing. We are surrounded by things that count as works of art. Side by side there appear in print thousands of poems, thousands of long poems, thousands of novels, thousands of dramas, thousands of pictures, thousands of pieces of music. All the poems describe love or nature or the author's state of mind, and in all of them, the meter and the rhymes are in order. All the dramas and comedies are splendidly staged and played by beautifully trained actors. All the novels are divided into chapters. All of them describe love. All of them have their effective scenes. All of them give true details of life. All the symphonies have their allegro, their andante, their scherzo, and their finale. All of them are made of modulations and chords, and all of them are played by musicians trained to the last degree of finish. All the pictures in their gold frames show faces and accessories in bold relief. But among these works, in every branch of art, there is 1 in 100,000 that is not merely a little better than the others. It differs from all the rest as a diamond differs from glass. The one cannot be bought for any money, so precious is it. The other is not merely worth nothing, it has a value below nothing, because it deceives and perverts taste. And yet from the outside, to a man whose feeling for art has been perverted or has withered away, the two are exactly alike. There is a further difficulty in telling real works of art apart in our society. In the false works, the outward finish of the workmanship is often not merely as good as in the true ones, but better. The counterfeit is often more striking than the real thing, and its subject more interesting. How is one to choose? How is one to find that single work among hundreds of thousands, when nothing on the outside marks it off from things deliberately made to look exactly like it? For a man whose taste has not been perverted, for a working man from the country and not from the town, it is as easy as it is for an animal with an unspoiled scent to pick out, among 1,000 tracks in the wood or the field, the one track it wants. The animal finds what it needs without a mistake. So does the man, provided the natural gifts of his nature have not been perverted in him. Out of thousands of objects, he unerringly picks the true work of art that he needs, the one that infects him with the feeling the artist has lived through. But it is not so for people whose taste has been spoiled by their upbringing and their way of life. In them, the feeling that takes art in has withered away. In judging works of art, they have to be guided by reasoning and study, and this reasoning and study confuse them completely, so that most people in our society are quite unable to tell a work of art from the crudest counterfeit of one. They sit for hours on end in concert halls and theaters, listening to the works of new composers. They consider it their duty to read the novels of the famous new novelists, and to look at pictures that either show them something they cannot understand, or show them again and again the very thing they can see far better in reality. Above all, they consider it their duty to be delighted with all of it, imagining that all of it is art. And meanwhile, they walk past real works of art, not merely without noticing them, but with contempt, simply because in their circle, those works have never been entered on the list of works of art. The other day I was walking home in low spirits. As I came near the house, I heard the loud singing of a large ring of peasant women. They were greeting my daughter, singing in her honor. She had married and had come home. In that singing, with its cries and the beating on a scythe blade, there was such a definite feeling of joy, of vigor, of energy, that before I knew it, I was infected by that feeling. I walked on towards the house with a lighter step, and I reached it thoroughly cheerful and glad. I found the whole household in the same lifted state, for they had been listening to the singing too. That same evening, a fine musician who had come to visit us, a man famous for his playing of the classics and of Beethoven above all, played us Beethoven's Sonata, Opus 101. For the benefit of anyone who would put my judgment of that sonata down to a failure to understand it, I ought to say this. Whatever other people understand in that sonata, and in the other works of Beethoven's last period, I understood in just the same way, being very open to music. For a long time I tuned myself up so that I could admire those shapeless improvisations that make up the substance of Beethoven's last period. But I had only to look at the business of art seriously and to compare the impression I got from the works of Beethoven's last period with a musical impression that is pleasant and clear and strong, the impression you get from the melodies of Bach, from his arias, and from Haydn, Mozart, and Chopin, where their melodies are not choked with complications and ornaments, and from Beethoven himself in his first period. Above all, the impression you get from a folk song, Italian, Norwegian, or Russian, from the Hungarian czardas, from simple, clear, strong things of that kind. As soon as I made that comparison, the dim and almost sickly excitement I had worked up in myself over the works of Beethoven's last period vanished at once. When the playing was over, everyone present, though you could see that they had all grown bored, praised Beethoven's profound work with the usual zeal. They did not forget to mention how people once failed to understand this last period, and how it is in fact his very best. And when I allowed myself to compare the impression that the singing of the peasant women had made on me, an impression shared by everyone who heard it, with the impression made by this sonata, the admirers of Beethoven merely smiled with contempt. They did not think such strange remarks worth an answer. And yet the song of the peasant women was real art. It carried over a definite and powerful feeling. Beethoven's 101st Sonata was only a failed attempt at art. It holds no definite feeling, and therefore it infects no one with anything. For my work on art, I spent this past winter reading, diligently and with great effort, the famous novels and tales that all Europe praises, Zola, Bourget, Huysmans, Kipling. And at the same time I came across a story in a children's magazine by a writer whose name means nothing to anyone. It tells how a poor widow's family gets ready for Easter. The mother has managed with difficulty to get hold of some white flour. She spreads it out on the table for kneading and goes off for the yeast, telling the children not to leave the hut and to keep an eye on the flour. The mother goes. The neighbors' children come running under the window, shouting for them to come out and play. The children forget what their mother told them, run out into the street, and lose themselves in the game. The mother comes back with the yeast. In the hut, a hen is standing on the table, scattering the last of the flour down onto the earthen floor for her chicks, who are picking it out of the dust. The mother in despair scolds the children, and the children howl. Then the mother begins to feel sorry for them. But there is no more white flour, and to mend the sorrow she decides she will bake the Easter loaf out of sifted rye flour, brushing it with egg white and setting eggs round it. Black bread is grandfather to the white loaf, she tells the children, offering the proverb as a comfort for the loaf that will not be made of white flour. And the children pass all at once, from despair to a joyful delight. They repeat the proverb in their different voices, and they wait for the Easter loaf more merrily than ever. And what happened? Reading the novels and tales of Zola, Bourget, Huysmans, Kipling, and the rest, with the most provoking subjects in them, did not move me for 1 minute. All the time I was annoyed with the authors, in the way you are annoyed with a man who thinks you so naive that he does not even hide the trick he means to catch you with. From the first lines you can see the intention the thing was written with, and then all the details become unnecessary, and you grow bored. And above all, you know that the author had no feeling in him at all, beyond the wish to write a tale or a novel, and never had any. So no artistic impression comes of it. But from the unknown author's story about the children and the chicks, I could not tear myself away, because I was infected at once by the feeling that the author had plainly lived through, experienced, and carried over. We have a painter, Vasnetsov. He painted the holy images in the cathedral at Kiev, and everyone praises him as the founder of some new and lofty kind of Christian art. He worked on those images for decades. He was paid tens of thousands for them, and every one of them is a poor imitation of an imitation of imitations, without one spark of feeling in it. And this same Vasnetsov made a little picture to go with Turgenev's story, The Quail, the story of how a father killed a quail in front of his boy and then felt pity for it. The picture shows the boy asleep with his upper lip pushed out, and above him like a dream, the quail. And that little picture is a true work of art. In the English album of the Academy, there are 2 pictures side by side. One of them shows The Temptation of St. Anthony by J.C. Dalmas. The saint is on his knees praying. Behind him stands a naked woman and some sort of beasts. You can see that the artist liked the naked woman very much, and that Anthony was no concern of his, and that the temptation is not merely not terrible to him, the artist, but on the contrary is highly agreeable. And so if there is any art in this picture, it is very poor art and false art. In the same book, next to it, there is a small picture by Langley showing a beggar boy off the street, whom the woman of the house has evidently called in out of pity. The boy is eating, his bare feet tucked pitifully under the bench. The woman is watching him, probably working out whether he will want more. And a little girl of about 7, her chin propped on her hand, is watching him carefully and seriously, never taking her eyes off the hungry boy. Plainly, she is understanding for the first time what poverty is, and what the inequality of human beings is. And plainly, she is asking herself for the first time why she has everything, while this boy goes barefoot and hungry. She is sorry, and she is glad, and she loves the boy, and she loves goodness. And you feel that the artist loved this girl, and loved what she loves. This picture, by a painter who is, I think, little known, is a fine and true work of art. I remember seeing Rossi play Hamlet. Our critics take the tragedy itself, and the actor who played the chief part, for the last word in dramatic art. And yet all through it, both from the substance of the drama and from the performance, I felt that peculiar suffering that false semblances of works of art produce. And not long ago I read an account of a theater among a wild people, the Vogels. One of the spectators describes the performance. One Vogel is big, another is small. Both are dressed in reindeer skins, and they play a reindeer doe and her calf. A third Vogel plays the hunter, with a bow and on skis. A fourth plays with his voice a bird that warns the deer of danger. The drama is that the hunter is running along the trail of the doe and her calf. The deer run off the stage and run back on. The whole performance takes place in a small hut. The hunter comes closer and closer to the 2 he is chasing. The calf is worn out and presses against its mother. The doe stops to get her breath. The hunter comes up and takes aim. Just then the bird calls out, warning the deer of the danger. The deer run. The chase begins again, and again the hunter closes in, catches up, and looses an arrow. The arrow strikes the calf. The calf cannot run any more. It presses against its mother, and the mother licks its wound. The hunter fits another arrow. The audience, as the man who is there describes it, and you can hear heavy sighs in the crowd, and even weeping. And from that description alone, I felt that this was a true work of art. What I am saying will be taken for a mad paradox, and people will only wonder at it. But I cannot help saying what I think. In our circle, some people compose poems, tales, novels, operas, symphonies and sonatas, paint pictures of every kind, and model statues. Others listen to all this and look at it. Others again value it and criticize it, argue over it, condemn it, celebrate it, and put up monuments to one another. And so it goes on for several generations. And all these people, with the very smallest exceptions, artists and public and critics alike, have missed one thing entirely. Except in earliest childhood and youth, before they had heard any talk about art, they have never felt that simple feeling that the simplest man, and even a child, knows well. Infection with the feelings of another, the feeling that makes you rejoice in another's joy, grieve at another's grief, and merge your soul with another human being, the feeling that is the very essence of art. And that is why these people not only cannot tell true art from a counterfeit of it, but always take the worst and most counterfeit thing for real and beautiful art, while they never notice real art at all, because counterfeits are always more richly decorated, and real art is modes.